I find seeing myself in some of these stories about David and about the consequences of his actions. You'll remember that when he sinned with Bathsheba and he was confronted by Nathan the prophet, he was told that the sword would never leave his house. He was told that the things that he had done in secret with Bathsheba would be done publicly against him. And we are now in the part of the story which enters into that whirlwind, that hurricane of consequences of his sin. It seems like, man, did he have to go through all of this? Was all of this really necessary? Well, it's not about being necessary. It's about being the real life consequences of the actions of a leader of a nation. You know, we tend to think that it's asking a whole lot for the leaders of a church to be held to a higher standard than everybody else. But it's reasonable when you begin to realize that when the leader sins, the ramifications are far wider, far deeper, far more severe than if anyone else sins. I know that I'm even seeing consequences of my own sins as maybe things that you're not even aware of. But they come naturally as a result of the position that I hold and because of the nature of the world that God has created, that sin has its effects and it has its consequences. And David is catching the full brunt of this. At the same time, though, God is with him in those consequences, and he is sustaining him. He is helping him to endure. God is wonderful. I mean, he could just stand back and say, well, you know what? You made your bed, you sleep in it, and let it go as it goes. But no, he is also very much in love with his son, David, and he is looking for ways and using ways to strengthen him and to encourage him. The story that we read this morning involves two Saulites. What I mean by that is people from the tribe of Saul. And they are people that ordinarily would have a bone to pick with David because they had been part of the family of Saul, and he was king and then he wasn't king. It was taken away from him and given to David, and there was this animosity, this bitterness that came about in their lives as a result of David's success. A success that was given by God. You remember that. God had taken the kingdom away from Saul, and he said, because you would not follow me, you would not obey me, you would not listen to me, you actually didn't care whether I thought of this or that or anything else about what you were doing. You just had your own agenda. You were living for yourself. You felt yourself to be king, and you weren't subservient to the King of Heaven. So I'm taking away the kingdom and I'm giving it to David. And so the people who were affected by this did not hear those words from Samuel. They did not have time to work it through, and many of them didn't care. They just lost a lot of the benefits that came from being from Saul's family. This is the tribe of Benjamin. That was Saul's tribe. Well, we have two Benjamites that are involved in our story today, and you'll see that their impact in David's life is basically negative. And it's partly because, well, they despised him for what he had done in taking away the kingdom from their tribe. Let's just go through the story briefly, and there's going to be things here for you to learn with respect to how do you respond to people who make your life worse when it's actually in the middle of a terrible situation. Have you ever been in a crisis and have people make it worse for you? Well, it's not too hard to think of examples in the Bible. You think of Jesus hanging on the cross and people mocking him, spitting at him, and telling all kinds of things to him concerning, all the things that you said you were going to do and you're not doing them. Come down from the cross, etc., etc. Well, David, who images Jesus, goes through something similar to that. As he is on his way out of Jerusalem, he is, first of all, encouraged by people coming and standing with him. You remember the servant said, we'll do anything that you need us to do. And then there were the soldiers that were Philistine soldiers who said, we will die with you. And then there was Zadok the priest who came and offered sacrifices, asking God to be with David and wanting to go with him. But David sends him back and says, no, you're more useful to me. First of all, the ark has no business being outside of Jerusalem. It's not my personal talisman. You put it back in the place where it's supposed to be, and then I want you to be spies for me, because I won't know what Absalom's doing unless you find out and send messengers to me. Send your sons, that is Zadok's and Abiathar's sons, were to be sent to him with any messages that would help him to know how to respond to Absalom. And so he sends them back. And then there's another person named Ahushai, and you'll remember how keenly it was a thing of God that Ahushai arrives right after David hears that Ahithophel, are you carrying all these names with you? I suspect you're not. All right, so Ahithophel is David's advisor. All right, remember him? Remember, he is also the grandfather of Bathsheba. You remember that Bathsheba had been violated by David, and Bathsheba's husband Uriah was murdered by David. And Ahithophel has kind of had a bone to pick with David. He had this bitterness in his heart for ruining the life of his grandchildren. And so he knows, being the wise person, he reminds me of a guy who's a chess player. You know, chess players, if you're going to be any good, have to have, 13 or 14 moves ahead that you've planned, and then you have 45 different alternatives depending on what the other person's going to do. You know, I'm really just a one-at-a-time guy. You know, how does this guy move? 2 forward and 1 sideways? Okay, that's me, all right? Ahithophel had it all planned, and he knew that he could do nothing until the right opportunity arose. And this, indeed, was a credible opportunity for him to get revenge. And so he goes over to the side of Absalom, and he becomes his advisor. Now, I won't be telling you today some of the things, I will not be telling you today some of the things that he does and the trouble that he actually makes for Absalom and for himself. However, he understands exactly how things are going to go. And so he goes over to Absalom's side, and then David hears of this. And of course, you know, that hurts. Here's your best advisor. You know that he's a tremendous asset to you. You rely upon him totally. Perhaps even David relied upon him more than he relied upon God. And that would be a sad situation. You know, if you have people who can give you really good advice and you stop praying, then that's a problem, because David really needed, and we also need to pray, even if we have wise counselors. So when he hears this news, strikes him at the heart, and he says, you know, God, confuse his advice to Absalom. And then in walks Ahushai. Ahushai is the other counselor that has been advising him as well. And Ahushai is God's man to answer that prayer. And so David sends him back, and he says, do whatever you can to confuse his advice. And so Ahushai goes, and next week you'll find out that he actually succeeds. But for this week, just know this, that they're on their way out of Jerusalem, being encouraged by different people that are coming along and saying, we're with you. Even the crowds are along the side of the road, just like with Abraham Lincoln's funeral train was going along. There were crowds along the side of the tracks just mourning over the death of their president. So these people were mourning over the loss of their King David as he is proceeding out of the city, and he's going up the Mount of Olives. He is barefoot, he is walking, he has got his head covered, he's weeping, and everybody is weeping with him. A sad, sad situation. So in the midst of this sad situation, moving very slowly, when probably speed was probably something that would have been a good advantage for them to get out of the way of Absalom returning, because when Ahushai goes back into the city. Absalom is coming in the other side, only 30 minutes after perhaps his conversation with David. So they're going up the hill, going out the other side, and then things are less encouraging. David had gone a short distance beyond the summit. The summit of what hill? You're listening, right? What hill is this? Mount of Olives. Okay, right outside the city. Crossed over the Kidron Brook, up the Mount of Olives. What? Anything New Testament happened in the Mount of Olives? Yeah, Jesus prayed there. Remember in the garden that he met with his disciples often there. Same place. They're going over the crest of the hill. Okay? And David had gone a short distance beyond the summit, and there was Ziba. All right, now you've had conversations about Ziba before. I mean, I taught you about Ziba. You remember, don't you? I thought not. So, let me just talk to you about Ziba. All right. If you go back to 2 Samuel chapter 9, take your Bibles if you would, and turn back to 2 Samuel chapter 9. You'll have the story of a man whose name rolls off your tongue, Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth, okay? You remember that David had made a covenant with Jonathan, his closest friend, the son of Saul, that he would bless his family. And remembering this promise to Jonathan, we read these words. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul whom I may show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household whose name was Ziba. All right. They called him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "Your servant," he said. The king asked, "Is there no one left, or is there no one still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. And Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Lodebar." Now, another name for you to remember, okay? Machir. All right? Machir is vital to the story coming up next week and the week following. So keep Machir in your thoughts, okay? Machir is from Lodebar. Lodebar, okay? He's a rich man, and he has been taking care of Mephibosheth. He's been living, Mephibosheth has been living with him. And this man will have a very important, significant part in the story as it goes forward. So Ziba said, that's where he is. So the King David said, "Have him bring him from Lodebar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel." And when Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down and paid him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth, your servant," he replied. He's nervous. Okay, that's why I went that way. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show your kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul. You will always eat at my table." And Mephibosheth's response, he bows down and he says, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Humility, gratitude, all coming from Mephibosheth. And the king said to Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring him the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table like one of my sons." So here's the situation then. He has been living off of the land that belonged to King Saul, and Ziba has been the servant. He's the head servant who has been using his sons and other servants, leading them to bring in the crops to farm the land for Mephibosheth. And it is this same Ziba who meets him over the crest of the hill. All right, so let's continue with that. Now David is surprised to see him. Let's see what he sees first of all. It says that Ziba, the steward of Mephibosheth, waiting there was to meet him. He had a string of donkeys, saddled and loaded, with 200 loaves of bread, 100 cakes of raisins, 100 cakes of figs, and a skin of wine. And David is surprised. Why is he surprised? Well, how do you know he was surprised? Because he says, "What are you doing here?" Okay, that's what he says here. He says, "What are the donkeys are all right, I'm missing here. You know what? I think I probably skipped it and I printed it in here. But anyway, what are you doing? All right, what is all this for? Here is Ziba, who is from Saul's family, in a time in which Saul's family would likely take advantage of the instability that's going on here, as Absalom is making a power play. And so he's wondering, what are you doing here? What is all this for? And Ziba answered, the donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and the fruit are for the men to eat, and the wine is to refresh those who become exhausted in the desert. I'm here for you, David. I am here for you. And everything that I've brought here is to sustain you while you're making your getaway. You can't walk all the way that you have to go. These are donkeys for you. You need food. You left very quickly. You didn't pack up. You didn't make storage. You just came. And so I'm here to sustain you. And David is thinking, wow, this is great. Wow, this is something that I would have expected from Mephibosheth. Oh, by the way, where is your master's grandson? Where is Mephibosheth? He was the one that I had blessed so richly, who was so grateful, who was humble, and he's been eating at my... I would have expected that he would have brought all this, but you have instead. Now, where is he? Where is he? Well, Ziba says, he's staying in Jerusalem, because he thinks, today the house of Israel will give me back my grandfather's kingdom. What do you think about that? You believe that? Do you think it's true? Okay, well, you're going to find out later as we go along. So, how does David feel about this? He says, then the king said to Ziba, all that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours. I humbly bow, Ziba says. May I find favor in your eyes, my lord the king. So, Ziba has told him a story, and David has swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. He makes a snap judgment, and he condemns Mephibosheth right away. You're going to find people like this in your life too that will take advantage of your crises. And you've seen it in other people's lives too. I got a ticket the other day. I'm confessing, all right? I got a ticket. I was driving home in this brand new rented car. And I'm thinking about how smooth this thing rides. Mine is noisy and it's, hot, no air conditioning. This thing is cool and smooth, and I'm driving through Quakertown. I'm just going very slowly and following the traffic in front of me. I think I'm going slowly. And I'm thinking about the car. And all of a sudden, this policeman steps out in front of me and he says, you. This is not good. This is not good. I'm the chaplain of the Hatfield Township Police Department. This should not happen. And so he comes over, and believe me, I did not tell him until after he gave me the ticket that I was the chaplain. And you'll see why. So he says, you know what? This is a state-operated kind of a snag zone. He didn't call it that, but I did. And he said, I have no leniency. I cannot give you anything. I know that you have never had a ticket and you've never gotten in trouble like this before. I cannot help you. Just take the ticket, and I'll tell you what, when you get the ticket, write on it, not guilty, and send it in, and I'll give you leniency at the court hearing. And I said, I'm not going to write on it not guilty. You said I was going 40 miles an hour in a 25 mile per hour zone. And I tell you, I'm a chaplain of the police department in Hatfield. I know you can't give me, I'm not looking for that. But I'm not going to lie to you and say that I'm not guilty. I'm just going to send it in. Oh, he's telling me how refreshing it was, that I was honest and good and all that. I'm paying you $142 to say that. So, here I have this situation, my little crisis, all right? And what do I get in the mail? I'm getting all kinds of advertisements from attorneys. We'll be glad to go in there and be with you. We'll be with you. We'll sustain you and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, right. You're not going to get anything out of it either, right? So there are people that are looking for those who have crises, and they will take advantage of them. They will. They will see that you are in a place where you're vulnerable, and they will take that opportunity. Some people will do it to get something from you. Others will do it to make your situation worse because they're angry at you. They don't like you. And so they're going to do these. How do you respond? How do you respond when people make your situation worse? David doesn't know it's worse yet here in this situation with respect to Ziba. But he makes a mistake. This is not what you should do. You should not simply listen to somebody who says, I'm for you. I mean, you should listen, but you should also listen with a careful ear. And so immediately, as soon as he sees, he sees all the provisions, and he's surprised at the kindness. He wants to reward this, and he's surprised at the absence of Mephibosheth. And so he says, I'll tell you what, everything I gave Mephibosheth is now yours. All right? Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm so surprised, but thank you. Yeah, he's not surprised. He walked away, rubbing his hands together, thinking, man, did I ever do a good one that time, right? He's walking away very satisfied. This is in the middle of the kings being expelled from Jerusalem. He has no care for the whole kingdom. He has no care for David's situation. He just got what he wanted. When it was given to Mephibosheth and he would be the servant, well, yeah, it probably improved his situation, but he didn't want to be the servant. He wanted to be the lord of the manor. That's what he wanted. And he saw his opportunity, and he took it when it came along. Well, I can't keep you hanging in terms of what actually happens here to this story. So before reading the rest of the story, take your Bibles and turn to the 19th chapter, okay? And I'm just going to fill you in just a little bit. This is actually, I'm going to tell you how the story goes before it actually gets there. David is going to be returned. He's going to be restored as king. And on his way back to cross the Jordan River to become king again in Jerusalem, people come to meet him. And one of the people that comes to meet him is Ziba. If you look at verse 17 of 2 Samuel 19, with him, that's about Shimei. We're going to get to Shimei in a minute. With him were 1,000 Benjamites, along with Ziba. Ziba, the steward of Saul's household, and his 15 sons and 20 servants were all there. They rushed to the Jordan where the king was, and they crossed at the ford to take the king's household over to do whatever he wished. They ran through the deep water, got over there just wanting him to see that they are so much on his side. And then there's Mephibosheth in verse 24. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, also went down to meet the king. Now Ziba is there to kind of consolidate what has been given to him. Since David has been kind, he's really obligated to be there to welcome him back. And he wants him to know that he was really sincere, so he's there. And he is, now here comes Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, also went down to meet the king. He had not taken care of his feet, or trimmed his mustache, or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day he returned safely. And when he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, "Why didn't you go with me, Mephibosheth?" Mephibosheth said, "My lord the king, since I, your servant, am lame, I said, I will have my donkey saddled and will ride on it so I can go with the king. But Ziba, my servant, betrayed me. He has slandered your servant to my lord the king. My lord the king is like an angel of God, so do whatever pleases you. All my grandfather's descendants deserve nothing but death, but from my lord the king, you. And you gave your servant a place among those who sat at your table. So what right do I have to make any more appeals to the king? Just do what you know is the right thing." And the king said to him, "Why say more? I order you and Ziba to divide the fields." And Mephibosheth said to the king, "Let him take everything, now that my lord the king has arrived home safely." See, this is what really happened. He was actually ready to come and be with the king, but then he was prevented from doing so because being lame, he didn't have a donkey and he couldn't get there. The evidences are the grown-out mustache. All of this is kind of like, grown-out mustache, long toenails. Why I don't mention that, I don't know. But clothes unwashed, all signs of mourning. If indeed he had been wanting to be crowned king in David's place, he would never have allowed all these things to happen. It makes him undesirable. It makes him, nobody wants him to be king. So, David sees this. Immediately he knows that what he's saying is the truth. Well, he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, sort of like Solomon with two women who say the baby is theirs, and he takes the sword and he's going to try and divide the baby in two and to find out who's really who's the real mother. But in this situation, David realized there's no way of coming to a real understanding of what actually totally happened without a reasonable doubt. Well, he's still grateful to Ziba for bringing all the provisions. So, Ziba, you can have half. He actually believes what Mephibosheth has said and that he has been taken advantage of, so he gives him half as well. And so he makes a good decision there. The problem was that before, and this is something I want to warn us about, is that when we hear things from other people, we need to be careful. Matthew Henry says it nicely. He says, God has given us 2 ears for a reason, so that you listen to both sides of the story before you make a judgment. How often do we not do that? We hear a rumor, it sounds credible, and we simply believe it, and we act upon it. And this is what David did. And later he finds out that that was the wrong thing to do. It was not righteous judgment. And so we need to watch out for those kinds of things. You're going to be very vulnerable to that, especially when everybody is against you and things are coming apart at the seams. You just see this as another one of the things in the list of things that are going wrong, and you just go with it. Don't do that. Don't just go with it, because it may not be right at all. Another thing I want you to notice is that Ziba, though his motivations may have been mixed, maybe they were not good at all, still, it was God working through him. God is able to work through sinners to do whatever his desire is to do. He provided for David through Ziba. And you can expect that God will do that through people that maybe you would never thought would do such a thing for you. So be expecting that, that God's working, and always keep that third dimension, always not seeing things just laterally, but keeping the fact that God is in control here. Now we'll see that much more in the next story. So if you want to go back to chapter 16, then I think we'll pick up the story again. So, as David, I'm looking at verse 5 now, chapter 16. As King David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan of Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera. And he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops and the special guard were on David's right and on his left. As he cursed, Shimei said, get out, you man of blood, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. The Lord has handed the king over to your son Absalom. You have come to ruin because you are a man of blood. Whoa. That really is comforting, isn't it? Makes you feel good when you're on your way out of Jerusalem and you're thinking everything's going to go to come, your death is imminent and your kingdom's lost and all of this. And here comes this person who makes it worse. Have you ever had that happen to you? When you've done something, perhaps you've made a mistake and you're trying to apologize, and that person just lays you out in red. Says you're incompetent, jerk, stupid, and if somebody else had been the boss, this never would have happened. Oh, thanks. I was apologizing. Yeah. Well, that's the way it goes at times, doesn't it? People don't care anything really about you. They don't even know whether what they're saying is true or not. The things that Shimei is saying are not true. David, I'm thinking he's referring to, first of all, Abner, the general who was killed by Joab in the camp of David. David had nothing to do with that, and he proved that he had nothing to do with it. Perhaps he was thinking of Ishbosheth, Saul's son, who was actually killed by his own men who wanted to get some advantage. Now, Shimei would probably assign the blame to David for this. And while Saul was chasing David all over the country, Shimei was probably believing the spin that was being sent out by Saul's people that David was indeed the criminal and that he was plotting against the king. Because you know how paranoid Saul was. And he was spinning that yarn and other people were believing it. We don't, because we know who David was. And David was a hero to us. But to them, they hear this and they think, oh, David is a criminal. And then when the Philistines beat the Israelites in battle, and somebody said that David had come north with the Philistines, well, of course, then David was responsible for Saul's death. How do you like that? So that's why he's saying the things he's saying. David has taken over the kingdom. His hands are covered with blood in this man's eyes, and he is angry. And he is going to just let David have it. He can't actually get at David, but he can throw stones from a distance. They're probably pelting the soldiers that are next to David. They're not probably hitting him, but he's doing his best to let David know that if I could, I would stone you to death. You're nothing like a piece of dirt. You're just a piece of dirt, you no good criminal. And he's going along the side on the hill, just out of reach. And of course, Abishai is not going to take this sitting down. Abishai says, the son of Zeruiah says to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head. And all the, turn 2 pages in one. The king said, what do you and I have in common, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord has said to him, curse David, who can ask, why do you do this? Now, it's important that we understand what David is saying, because first of all, he refuses. This is just insult. All right? This is not the same thing as what Absalom is doing. This is just a man who is letting off steam because he's angry and bitter. And there are times, when you just have to let him do it. Your pride is hurt, perhaps, and you could, if you wanted to, just go over there and let him have it, and it would be over with, and you would feel better, but then you'd feel worse because you were like him by doing the same things. So David says, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to cut his head off, though you could. He says, we don't have things in common. Sort of like when Jesus was on his way to Nazareth, on his way through trying to think of the name of the town. Can't do it. Who's the woman at the well? What was her nationality? Help me out here. Samaritan, yes. He was going into Samaria, and a Samaritan town would not receive him. And of course, James and John, being the sons of thunder, said, okay, Lord, this is time to shine. Let's burn them. Okay, let's send fire down from heaven. Let's just take care. And Jesus says the same thing to them. You and I are not on the same page. I didn't come here to judge. I came to save, to seek and to save lost people. And David says to Abishai, you and I are not the same here. I want you to think about this, Abishai. All you're thinking about is, that man should not be insulting my king. Yes, the Torah, the law says that it is a capital crime, a sin of high nature to curse the king of your people. But you need to understand just the whole context of what's going on here. It's not just about you and him and me. It's about God. He's involved in this too. What is he doing? Why is he allowing this? And that's what he talks about. He says, if he is cursing because the Lord said to him, curse David, well then who can ask, why are you doing this? In other words, you shouldn't be doing this when God has actually ordained that this should happen. David is not suggesting that somehow Shimei got a vision at night and that God spoke to him and said, go out and curse David. What David is really saying here is that you have to understand that there's the providence of God, that he's in control of all of these events. And if God is permitting this, then I'm not going to be out there to stop my own trivial insult, being insulted by this man. I'm going to bow to what God is doing. God knows that I deserve more than what he's doing to me. We're all so uppity about whenever somebody says something about us that is not true. We get so easily offended about that. Well, how about this? How about if somebody laid out all of our sins in front of us? Do you suppose that there might have been a justification for some of the things they said? Oh, yes. That's why I think it's important for us to say at times like this, you know what? If he knew the half of my sins, he would be justified in saying what he's saying. I'm no great shakes. Instead of being so high and uppity and proud, be humble, because we are sinners. We do bad things, and we deserve far worse than what we're given. And what we're given is all of grace. So he goes on to say this. He says, my son who is of my own flesh, look at what my son is doing. If my son is seeking for my life and for my kingdom, shouldn't he just have his say too in all of this? Who can blame him for saying what he's saying if my own son is looking to kill me? Abishai, get your perspective on this. The same sort of thing was happening to Jesus. They were cursing him on the cross. And Acts chapter 2 tells us that according to the foreknowledge and the foreordination of God, wicked men took the Son of God and put him on a cross. Now that doesn't relieve them of the responsibility of the things that they said. But Jesus didn't say, hey, you can't talk to me like that. I'm the Son of God. He just let him. He just let him. And he said things like, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And this is what pretty much this amounts to, is David saying, Father, whatever is your purposes here, I submit to them. So when people say bad things about you, and you know that they're not true, it's not necessary for you to get all uppity and defend yourself, because in the process, perhaps you'll become aware of the fact that, you know what, you're defending something somebody who's actually guilty of worse things than this. So let it go. Let it go. And so they did. Perhaps, he says, good will come of this. Verse 12, it may be that the Lord will see my distress and repay me with good for the cursing I am receiving today. God is in control here. I don't need to defend myself. So his men and David continued along the road while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went, throwing stones at him, showering with dirt. And the king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted, and there he refreshed himself. In closing, what do we learn from this? David had no idea when he sinned with Bathsheba and had her husband killed, what this was going to do to him. If you're young, even if you're not, don't give in to sin. You have no idea what distress it will bring into your life later on. Always, always fight against sin. But in the midst of the consequences of the sins that you have committed, don't think of God as being up there and saying, see, I told you. I told you it was going to happen. Now you made your bed, you sleep in it. That's not how God sees these things. Even as the consequences are being laid upon us, he is there nurturing us. He's protecting us. David is surrounded with soldiers. They've got their shields up. The rocks are flying. None of them hitting David. You see, God is with him in the midst of the consequences of his sin. Did you get pregnant as a result of a sin? Don't think of God there pointing at you and saying, you know what? Now you got it. You asked for it. No, he's still there saying, yes, these are the consequences. I still love you. I will carry you through this. I will minister to you. That is so important, so precious a truth. So see God's hand in these things by faith. See God's hand in them. And as he is carrying you through times when other people are taking advantage of you or they're trying to make your situation worse, remember, you're not abandoned. He will carry you through that too. It's all part of life. That's this sinful world and what it's like. And then refreshment will come eventually. They were a tired bunch when they arrived at their destination in Bahrain. When Mita and I and John got back from North Carolina, we were a tired bunch. You know, I'm taking things out of my father-in-law's apartment. This is a final step kind of thing. Dad's now in a nursing home. Sad for Mita. She's on the verge of tears a lot. And then, you know, the work and then one day he took a nap in the afternoon when he shouldn't have, laying down, and we were there trying to help him get up, and he said, "Don't touch me." And then just to hear the cries of agony as he tries to get up. We were a tired bunch when we got home. But then when we got home, there was a birthday party for my mom. There was good steak to eat. There was friends and family to surround us. And we were refreshed. Refreshed. God carries us through, and then there will come a time of refreshing. You're not there yet? Trust him. He'll bring you there. He'll bring you there. And remember that he's with you in those times, carrying you, consoling you. Let's pray together. Father, I thank you that you do not leave us alone, and that even when things are happening that were our fault, you're still with us. You're still carrying us. When we walk through the waters, you are with us. When we walk through the fire, it will not burn us, because you are the Lord our God, and you go through that with us. Thank you, Father. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So now, by faith, we sing this last song, saying, "Guide me, thou great Jehovah."